Gloria Strode, and welcome to Straightforward. Today we are visiting with our awesome community friend, Judge Marc D'Antonio. Thank you, Judge, so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
Well, you do so much in support of families, those with disabilities, drug court, mental health court. I mean, it's just so much that you do with estates, guardianship, besides marrying people, which is the happy stuff. You swear in the politicians. So that's kind of the easy thing for you to do. But on a day-to-day basis, you really wear a lot of hats. Very stressful. A lot of things we don't talk about, we need to talk about in advance. And that is what this visit is about today. So in your guardianship side of responsibilities, I need for you to share with our audience why it's important to have people in charge of matters ahead of time, and then we're not acting in a crisis.
Okay, I'm happy to talk about that. Guardianships are a very severe, very involved process that takes an adult and turns them back into a child. And you wouldn't want someone doing that to you unless you've exhausted all other alternatives to a guardianship. And you would want to make sure that there are a lot of procedural safeguards to prove that you certainly do need a guardianship. It can be very frustrating to families with developmentally disabled children or adults that are starting to have memory issues and dementia issues about all of the steps one has to go through to become somebody's guardian. But again, if you put yourself in the shoes of the individual whose rights are being taken away, you'd want to make sure you had all that due process.
Right. We don't want somebody pulling a trick.
Right.
We're trying to get control of resources or assets.
And that's also why a guardianship requires usually two people or two doctors or licensed clinical social workers or psychologists to be involved in the process. Also, the individual whose rights are being taken away to always has a right to a lawyer.
Okay.
And so that can be an involved process. There are many steps one can take to avoid the guardianship process.
Okay.
Probably two of the most important things for folks to have are an advance directive for health care, where you make decisions about, when you can't make decisions about your health care, that individual can, and that document also will allow you to designate somebody to become your guardian should you lack that capacity.
Okay,
But
so
it really
that's very important.
Yeah, and it can avoid you having to have a guardian.
Okay, so the advance directive. Okay, is that something that's very expensive, but it's a very basic kind of thing that most people have? Because I know usually, like I've had surgery before, and they'll ask you. Well, I always thought they just asked in case you don't wake up. Sign here in case you don't wake up.
They do ask you, and it is a statutory form.
Okay.
And so you can get them pretty much fairly easily. I also do think it's helpful to have advice of a lawyer or somebody that has done a lot of this kind of work to help you understand the nuances between different selections you may make in an advance directive for healthcare. Before there were advance directives for healthcare in Georgia, there were living wills. Right,
see, and that's what I was familiar with, a living will.
And there was some confusing language in the old statutory living will, and for example, it had double negatives about not withholding food, not withholding hydration. And those are steps that you really want to have a full understanding before you say, I want people to starve me.
Exactly.
So the advance directive for healthcare is a standard form. It's still worth talking to somebody about how to, or what boxes mean in terms of what you're going to check and what you're not.
Before you agree to something.
Well,
and then you need to have a credible person.
Well,
or somebody that's going to be available and willing. Shouldn't you ask someone in advance if that would be a role they would want to take?
By all means, one of the other important things is to let everyone know what your wishes are while you're capable of expressing your wishes.
Okay.
In fact, an advance directive for healthcare, because you do it while you have capacity, does not automatically get revoked when you file for a guardianship.
See, I didn't know that.
And so that can be very important for me to take away an advance directive through a guardianship proceeding. I have to enter a finding of fact that somebody has acted contrary to the best interest of the individual that gave the power of the advance directive for healthcare.
Wow. And that's why it's important, because I know where I know of a situation where someone was appointed to be something and they were not even in the same state. So they were not even willing to show up. And the people that were actually providing the care and the day-to-day, they couldn't make decisions because the other person was in a different state.
Well, and you can nominate alternates too.
Okay, so that's the piece. So you can have the primary person, and then just in case.
Just in case. You can nominate an alternate. Another important document to avoid guardianships and conservatorships is a power of attorney, a financial power of attorney. Again, there's a statutory form, and this is, again, somebody you need to appoint someone that you trust, that will not take advantage of you.
Yes.
But having somebody that can make financial decisions when you're not capable of making those, again, can avoid you having to go through the long, involved process of becoming a guardian and conservator.
Okay, someone that you can trust. It's not necessarily always a relative. It could be. No, I'm just saying.
No, I've had more than one grandmother whose grandson, through a power of attorney, was not using the funds for grandma's care. And that can be really frustrating because grandma wants her money back, but doesn't want her grandson to get in trouble.
Exactly. So sometimes it might be wise, depending on the family dynamics, to get a neutral person that you respect and trust to ensure that everything that you want done, it will be carried out in the manner. I mean, it's sad, but that's really the world that we live in. It really is.
Well, and have that conversation with whomever you're going to appoint before you appoint them. Make sure that they're willing. Tell everyone what your wishes are. That's the best way to avoid being in this courtroom.
And then maybe just giving you a headache where you can't sleep.
Well, I don't mind. That's what I get. I'm very pleased to be the probate judge, and I know they're important decisions. And
you actually have the patience and the personality for that. I mean, you're a very kind, level-headed, individual, and so when you get people that's, all out the box, you have the right disposition for that. But what we're going to do is take our first break, go to our sponsors, and we'll be right back. We'll be right back after a word from some of our sponsors.
Straightforward is brought to you by State Senator Ed Harbison, serving the citizens of Georgia's 15th Senatorial District and on the front lines for veterans every day. The Columbus Memory Center, 7196 North Lake Drive, Suite A, Columbus. Dr. Jonathan Liss is a board-certified neurologist and sleep specialist committed to battling Alzheimer's by preserving independence, offering you the opportunity to get your memory number for free, the only vital sign for brain health. Call today at 706-327-4000 or visit columbusmemorycenter.com. The Miley Agency, 4903 Armour Road. Gerald L. Miley and William Ripsinger have been providing comprehensive reviews and insuring families in Georgia and Alabama for more than 50 years. The Miley Agency will work non-stop to find you the best policy at the best price. You can rest assured that your information is secure, confidential, and protected. Call today at 706-996-2045.
Welcome back to Straightforward. I'm continuing this very, very important visit with Judge Marc D'Antonio, our probate judge. He's the perfect guy for this job. I support him 100%. He has the patience. He's fully committed. He believes in what he does, and he worked very hard, very approachable, and that's really what I like about you, that humble spirit, and you're always willing to help people, even when folks make a mess of everything. We had a sidebar conversation. You gave me some advice, because I thought, okay, we've done the right thing. Of course, Daddy has moved from work to reward, and you shared some information that I needed to know even about heir property and what normally happens when the original people die and the young people get left and nobody wants to pay the taxes on the land. and that kind of thing. So all of that is very important. I wanted you to share when we talk about those with, and I know you've done a lot of work with our mutual friend Diane Pope from the Autism Hope Center. Share some pearls of wisdom with families that have children on the autism spectrum. And I know Diane said that sometimes they think that leaving life insurance is going to take care of everything for the person with the disability. We have people on the spectrum that are very high functioning, but then we have some that do not function, at a certain level. What are those pearls of wisdom about that?
There's a number of things that people do need to look out for when doing estate planning for somebody that has a disability.
Okay, that's under estate planning.
Well, in
Okay.
terms of you
In
don't.
case the parent dies.
Well, if a parent dies
Mhm.
and you leave a lot of money to somebody that's receiving supplemental security income, called
Mhm.
SSI, and Medicaid, you may have disqualified them from their Medicaid and SSI benefits until the money gets spent down.
Right.
And that can be tragic because sometimes it's harder to find the services that aren't being provided through Medicaid
Right,
as
for-
easily.
Right, with folks with disabilities.
Right.
So that could be, so you left Johnny $20,000, but he had to give up his Medicaid,
And spend down that money.
spend
which-
down, and he still needs to pay for health care, he still needs to pay for rent, food, shelter, which then that ends up being nothing.
Well, and there's
Compared
ways of
to-
avoiding that.
Okay.
One of the ways of avoiding it under the right circumstances is to create something called a special needs trust.
Okay, a special needs
And a
trust.
special needs trust allows the money set aside to cover people's, not their food, shelter, clothing, but their other special needs they may have.
Okay.
Like say somebody that has a disability that might require a van or
Mhm.
transportation or
Mhm.
other things that normally that you might need to
A
be-
lift in
to-
the bathtub.
a lift, or just other things. It could also be other services about about helping people adapt to behaviors, especially people that are sometimes on the spectrum.
Mhm.
They might benefit from applied behavioral analysis or
Mhm.
other types of special counseling or even some services related to training care providers.
Now that's important. And what I've learned from Diane, because she's brilliant, and Marianne and that board, is that we have people in the community when they encounter people on the autism spectrum, because the spectrum is so wide. You have this end and that end and everything in between. They don't know how to manage. You might see a child or a young adult in the public and they're having an episode in the restaurant and people don't understand what's going on. So there's resources for training for that to help with the care.
There's definitely a need for crisis intervention training for law enforcement
Mhm.
and for family. Some cases can be extremely challenging. It's important for folks, and Ms. Pope and others can talk more about knowing what are going to be an individual's triggers
Right.
and knowing how best to de-escalate
Like
those
that,
matters when
right.
it comes up. In terms of the probate court, when there are folks that can't be de-escalated, then sometimes they come to the court, and we have to talk about orders to apprehend for crisis stabilization or other things along those lines. Most people that have a mental illness do not need guardianships, and a lot of high functioning people with disabilities do not need guardianships.
Okay, so you almost have to have a medical degree now to do your job.
No,
Because I think that we just think of, well, you can go get a gun license, he marries people, but you're really doing some very heavy lifting with all of those other roles.
And I'm less worried about the labels people might have than
Mhm.
what is their functional capacity.
Really?
And well, I mean, that's the standard in terms of deciding whether or not somebody needs a guardianship. It goes to what is their functional capacity. And there are lots of people that might have might be mildly intellectually disabled, but have been able to work things out so that their functional capacity is fine, where they do not necessarily need to be interfered with.
Okay, they can live whatever normal is these days, a normal life. They can take care of their
and
normal
with
daily
supports.
with some support, right?
Right,
And
with-
live independently. And
Well, having people that can help you make supported decisions, and having one thing that actually can be very helpful, and every individual's different, every situation's different, and I have to adapt to the individual's needs and listen to what is going on with every individual. But for some people, you can enter into a supported decision-making agreement where the individual that might have some diminished capacity has agreed, oh, if I have an issue related to finances, I'm going to go talk to Uncle Johnny.
Okay.
If I have an issue related to health care, I'm going to talk to Aunt Susan. And I agree that I'll listen to them, that I will not make a decision or do something without consulting them first. And then that they can sort of help support and explain and help them realize what might be the best way to make those decisions.
So in addition to a law degree, you really kind of needed the social work degree, the psychology degree, because no, really, all of that is coming into this courtroom.
Well, and my background, I represented low-income people in non-criminal matters for 15 years before coming to the court. And I used to jokingly say that I was a social worker that could sue you.
You were getting on-the-job training, and I always tell people that was preparing you for this role. And that's why you are so good at it, because you've worked on the other side with seeing what people don't have a lot of resources, what they've had to do to navigate. And so I think that was all useful. Those 15 years, you didn't get paid a lot, but it was worth it.
Well, and also it's an ability to, people are people regardless of, there's rich people that are jerks, there are poor people that are jerks, there are nice people on both things, and you just treat everyone as an individual, and you take them where they're coming from.
Okay.
And being able to listen to and respect people and listen to their wishes, well, no matter what their capacity is a very important skill as a lawyer, as a judge, as a human being.
All right, I like that. Well, what we're going to do is go to our break to our sponsor, and we'll be right back. We'll be right back after word from some of our sponsors.
Progressive Funeral Home, family owned and operated since 1952. The George Ford legacy of high standards continues today in the compassionate and professional services provided. A touch of dignity for those who care. Progressive Funeral Home, 4235 St. Mary's Road. Trusted by generations. Apple Tax Services for the best in tax preparation. 7413 Whitesville Road, Columbus. Call for your appointment today at 706-243-2590 or 706-243-2595. And remember, an apple a day keeps the audits away.
And welcome back to Straightforward. I'm continuing this wonderful visit today at the probate court with the one and only Judge Marc D'Antonio. You are a missionary. Besides being a judge, a lawyer, social worker, advocate, it's a lot. And I did not realize, I always just thought, okay, when somebody dies, you're going to probate the will. You can go down there and get married. I've seen the little military people get married, and then you see them outside taking pictures. I know you've done things with...
We issue weapons carry licenses,
for
which
the
are not
gun.
required, but still useful.
I know, very useful, just in case you need another ID for something. But I just did not understand all the other things that you are juggling on a day-to-day basis. Being a social worker by profession, dealing with families is very difficult. It's probably easier to go out and train troops at Fort Benning because you have all of this family dynamics. And we don't always, as humans, we are reactionary. We're very emotional. Somebody passed away, somebody married somebody else, and they left a kind of messy situation, and you get to clean all of that up.
Well, I do see people let that probably some of their most vulnerable state, whether they've just lost a loved one or whether they're somebody that has a severe and persistent mental illness and are decompensating, or people that are losing capacity. And I really, be honest about it, I like dealing with cases involving people fighting about deceased people's property because I'm going to apply the law and try my best to get it right, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
That's what I was going to ask you. Well, does
But I
this court
do lose
keep
sleep
you up
over
at
some,
night?
not
Some
that
other
far.
cases.
Of making decisions about whether somebody needs to stay involuntarily in a psychiatric facility or needs to be committed to involuntary outpatient treatment, or if I'm taking away their basic civil rights through a guardianship or conservatorship. Those are the cases that I agonize over because my decisions affects people that are alive, and the best way I try to decide those cases is I try to put myself in the shoes of the person that I'm going to be taking away rights or interfering with rights. Well, I mean,
No, that touched me very deeply, because some people it just becomes a process. You know, it's like working in a factory and just pushing papers. You know, I've worked in a whole lot of places, and it's like, okay, that's just another case. But what you just said to me, you put yourself in the person's place where you're taking their civil rights.
well, and I think that's the right way to be a judge.
It is the right way to be the judge.
I mean, we have a lot of folks. Well, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I'm working on a lot right now is we have an assisted outpatient treatment program grant for people with severe and persistent mental illness to help them through a court order while they're out in the community to be strongly encouraged to take their medicine, to keep their appointments, to refrain from alcohol and drugs, and by doing so, to keep them out of inpatient psychiatric facilities, out of jail, and out of homelessness. And when I think, and sometimes that does involve making questions about whether that individual can make informed consent. And I really often think if I'm in a situation where I'm looking at ordering somebody into involuntary treatment, would this be something I'd want someone to do to me if I was in that situation? If I've rotated in and out of the Bradley Center and the jail 7 times in 1 year, yes, I would want some strong encouragement to keep my appointments and take my medicine.
That's a clear indicator. That's a clear, you know.
Well, I mean, those are the things when we measure success of our assisted outpatient treatment program, which we're working collaboratively with New Horizons and a number of other, the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and a number of other providers, including American Work. In those situations, I'm really looking at how do I measure if we're being successful, and the way we measure success is we've had, in the year before you were under an outpatient order, you've had 5 hospitalizations and 3 jailings. Since you've been under the order, you might have had to be restabilized once. I mean, that's how we measure success.
That's showing progress.
Right. Or ideally, you don't need to go to the hospital at all.
Exactly. Yes. So you're doing that on a day-to-day basis. No, really, that's a lot.
And that's an important, it's one of the more important parts of my job.
Yes, it is. But that is heavy lifting. That's a big burden.
Well, and but we have a lot of community support. We have Dr. Cindy Patillo over at New Horizons, and Olga Maxwell and Leanne Spires over at American Work, and they're the ones that are dealing with individuals every single day, day in and day out, trying to their best to guide folks.
And that is not a job that you will get rich doing. See, and sometimes people that work in corporate America and that's great. We need folks in all parts of the workforce to make things work. But I've had a debate with somebody on social media about that. Well, they should go get a better paying job. And I'm thinking, okay, but I know that they had a family member in a facility that had a social worker, which it was a rehab place. So what if the social worker wasn't there? That social worker was a person. You won't make $100,000 a year, but it's a necessary role, is what I'm saying. So the American Works, the people over at New Horizons, all of you all collaborating together with you to try to help other citizens have a better quality of life.
Right, and I'm a huge fan of licensed clinical, all social workers.
Yes.
And we use licensed clinical social workers for evaluations, for recommendations, all the time here. Those are some of the best resources I have in the community.
And they're not the people that make $250,000 a year for the person that told me, well, they should go get a better paying job. And I'm thinking, we need all of these people to help make the community better. It makes it safe. It helps that individual, but it helps us as well. Because if people are having episodes and they're out on the street, it puts law enforcement at risk. If they get a call for somebody that's having a psychotic episode, because I worked at South Florida State Mental Hospital in Florida. So no, they've had people that were criminally insane. So if you've seen that, I mean, that's a very...
Well, but for the grace of God go I.
Exactly. It could be any one of us, but we do want all of those services. Well, this has
And we should support them.
And we should support them, exactly, because they're not going to get rich doing it, and we so need them. Well, this has been part one of this visit, very important. I know that you were very busy. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, but I wanted us to start the new year with sharing useful information so families and individuals can get a plan. So we are not always operating because it's a crisis. We need to be proactive instead of reactionary. So we're going to end part one right here, and then we're going to come back with part two. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. This has been straightforward. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Until next time, be blessed.
What up, world? What's up, Columbus? Be sure to tune in every Sunday, Straightforward with Gloria Strode, right here on NBC 38.